Okay, so good afternoon, everyone. And for those who are here, so we'll have our reading club forum. And for those who are listening to us, then you are most welcome to join us also here. And for those who are reviewing, perhaps you just have to listen. And for those who are researching, then you may continue, but then we are much grateful if you will also listen to us, okay? So for today, we have our guest speaker. This is a short bio note of her. Actually, this is already posted in our Facebook page. And by the way, we are also live streamed to our Facebook page, Baguio City Public Library, so that we can also accommodate questions online. Okay? And okay, to start with, the topic for today is, of course, an Ibaloy culture history through an addim. Did I pronounce it right? Okay, so I really do not know kung ano yung ibig sabihin ng LA. Siguro yung ating guest na lang magsasabi kung anong ibig sabihin ng LA. But our guest for today is LA Kiluden. She's from Mount Data, Bacopo in Mountain Province and Baguio City. She graduated with a BA degree in Language and Literature from the University of the Philippines, Baguio, where she is currently taking up a master's degree. She has been a creative writing fellow in various national writers' workshops hosted by University of the Philippines, Ateneo de Manila, and Universidad ng Santo Tomas. She served as full-time faculty at St. Mary's School of Sagada in Mountain Province, where she taught writing, literature, research, and facilitated community-based heritage mapping projects as part of the school's Indigenous People's Education, or the IPED program. She writes and has published fiction and non-fiction as a member of the Ubog Cordillera Writers Group. She writes for Baguio Chronicle also, and at present, she teaches undergraduate courses in UP Baguio. Ladies and gentlemen, it is our great honor to have with us here Miss L.A. Piluden.
Thank you. Okay, so I'm LA, and this is hopefully just a short lecture. I don't know whether to sit down or stand up. I think it does not make a difference. Anyway, but there you go. Let me just check, because it seems that my lecture for this afternoon was not saved, so I will just use the same slides that I used when I also talked about the same topic in the Department of Filipino in UP Diliman. So basically, yeah, the topic that was promised is an Ibaloy cultural history through an addim. So ayan. A few disclaimers before starting this talk. I am not a historian. I'm not an expert in history. This is not the degree I finished. And this talk does not promise to be the comprehensive Ibaloy cultural history, no, but rather it is an Ibaloy cultural history as seen through an addim, which is a sort of an old chant used to yung chinachant nila during a badyog ritual among Ibaloys, but because this ritual is no longer practiced, naturally the oral tradition that accompanies this ritual is no longer being chanted, or is no longer an active part of the culture. So we no longer see addim being recited or chanted nowadays, because yun nga, the ritual that is used to accompany this oral tradition is no longer helpful, to the current Ibaloy society. This badyog used to be a healing ritual, no? And there are all sorts of healing rituals among the Ibaloy anyway. I think the oral traditions among the Ibaloy that are familiar to us will be the Bakdiw, which is the most common and the most popular, kasi that's the one with the contemporary versions already, as well as popular forms of the takmiya. We see that being rendered into contemporary song by music groups today like Salidumay or the Ayanti Kultura de Cordillera, etc. No? But the addim is sort of, we can say na it's no longer an active oral tradition. No? Parang kalansay na lang siya because all we have of the addim is its written counterpart, or the way it was documented through written tradition. So this lecture draws heavily from these texts that give us insights about this addim. The last addim was recited noong 1940s pa. So talagang we have no way of listening to it live today. No? Pero there are recordings that still exist. I would let you listen to one, pero yun nga, alas, hindi ito yung na-save na slides ko for this afternoon sana. But anyway, ayan. So, yeah, this specific addim that I've chosen, I've taken from the study of national artist for music, si Ramon Santos, who had this fieldwork with the Ibaloy of Kabayan. And of course, a wealth of knowledge and worldviews we take from the Ibaloy dictionary. And syempre, no, parang dictionary yan. Talaga bang, can you draw culture from a dictionary? No, but this is very much the methodology of Cordillera scholars like William Henry Scott, no, who used dictionaries to reconstruct 16th century Philippines. So there is a possibility to reconstruct our ancestor society just based on the words they used, the poems that they sang, and the sorts of meaning making that we draw from the wealth of vocabulary, no? And also Nabaloy tales from Claude Moss. This is from the 1920s. If the Ifugaos have and Henry Otley Beyer, the Ibaloys have Claude Moss, the earliest, among the earliest American anthropologists to document Ibaloy oral tradition. Okay, so let's proceed. Ayan. So, ayan, I still have the Filipino translation because this was a lecture meant for a Filipino class. But anyway, this is a sample addim, and this is going to be the focus of our lecture/discussion today. There's the Ibaloy, the original, its transcription, no? The original addim in Ibaloy, its translation in Filipino, and its translation in English. Allow me to read to you na lang the Ibaloy, the original. No? Himusad si kabigat, ingkusad to'y balitok to, si kato'y imbak ng tiyak. Himusad si bugan, ingkusad to'y kintuman, si kato'y imbak ng tiyak. Himusad si lumawi, ingkusad to'y nuwang to, si kato'y imbak ng tiyak. Himusad si bangan, ingkusad to'y pulos to, si kato'y imbak ng tiyak. And ayun, in English, no, kabigat went down. He brought his gold that made them rich. Bugan went down. She brought the kintuman that made them rich. Lumawig went down. He brought his carabao that made them rich. Bangan went down. She brought taro that made them rich. So very characteristic, no, of the folk tradition of poetry and song. No, the element of repetition is there, and we become aware that oral poetry or any song from the folk tradition really draws on repetition because these are poets who did not have a código. No, they did not write down their words, but they said their words, they chanted, they sang extemporaneously, no, on the spot and just based on memory. So yung utak lang nila ang storage nila, no, to recite their poems, no, and repetition is a very useful mnemonic device, no, or formula for the oral poets to remember their chants. So kaya pansin natin sa oral poetry, paulit-ulit siya. And it's not because it is simplistic, and it's not because it is incapable of complex thought, no? But it's because it is a mnemonic device, no? And the oral poet, no, ini-improvise niya yan as they go, no? There's a formula I will adhere to, and then linalagyan ko na lang ng keywords paiba-iba through every stanza. So, on the outset, no, we see this very simple sort of poem, no? Parang poem yung dating niya, no? Very simple story about kabigat, bugan, lumawig, bangan, and syempre, no, for the Cordillera, and in our public imagination, we recognize these names, no? Sino mga to? Anyone familiar with these names? Sina kabigat, bugan, lumawig, at bangan? Sino sila? You know, our collective memory tells us these are the names of our gods. You know, these are the names of our kabunyan. No? If kabunyan is a common noun, usually we say kabunyan is the proper name for the Cordilleran god, but it's more of a common noun. No? And their specific names are kabigat, bugan, lumawig, and bangan. So these are the personalities that the Ibaloy ancestors prayed to, and they each have their significance, no? And we are so well versed in Greek mythology, no, and all the gods of Western mythology. But we have forgotten, no, that we still have gods living amongst us here in Baguio, here in Capaguay, no, and they are in the remnants of our old texts, and kailangan natin sila hugutin, no, especially since the addim is no longer being recited, no? It's no longer being chanted in a contemporary setting. So, magandang halugugin ito sa bowl. And then, let's see what we make of it. No? So, let's use this addim to talk about a cultural history of the Ibaloys. Parang, let's get to know who the Ibaloys are using this addim na merong 4 stanzas. Okay ba? Okay. Sige, let's start with the first one. Kimusad si Kabigat. Kabigat came down, he brought his gold at nagpayaman. That made them rich, nagpayaman sa kanila. Ayan, Kabigat. Now, Kabigat, okay, ang pinakadakila sa mga kabunyan ng Ibaloy. He is the most celebrated god of the Ibaloy. He is said to be the god of lightning and thunder. He is said to be the god that brought gold into Benguet. And that is how he is invoked in ritual myth. No? So, kabigat, no? Balitok, no? Or our word for ginto, gold. Okay, sabi dito, no? Sige, Englishin ko na lang. For the sake of some of our audience members, no? It is said that gold among the Ibaloy, and there are many variants of this, no? Actually, pwede nyo i-google lahat ng ito. The Ibaloys have a myth of gold, no? That ang ginto, gold came from a mythical tree that grew out of the corpse of a pregnant woman. No? In some myths, it's not a pregnant woman. Sometimes it's an old man, no? But there you go, no? Gold came from a mythical tree that grew from a corpse. And so the golden tree grew. It grew and grew, and it grew so large, no, that and then this tree, of course, it was kabigat, no. It was the gods who were responsible for the growth of the tree, no. And then the people, they saw that it was made of gold, so they took the fruits which were made of gold, and then they traded this with the goods with their neighbors in the lowlands, etc. And then there came a time when the people became selfish, that they did not stop at the fruits of the golden tree. They ended up cutting its branches, sending its leaves to the rivers. Ayun, no? And then they ended up cutting the tree. And when they cut the tree, it caused earthquakes. It caused flooding. It redirected the direction of the rivers, no? So that was the consequence of their selfishness. That was the consequence of their greed. the earth responded in kind. And we can look at this myth as a sort of, allegory, perhaps for our times, no? Di ba ganun naman lagi, no? When we read myths, we have a tendency to read it as an allegory. And the allegory that is being taught to us here is every resource we take from the land has its consequence. We pay for it, no? Our unsustainable treatment of the land, and the land will respond in kind. So yun yung myth of the golden tree of the Ibaloy. No? And that is the mythic basis of this verse, no, about kabigat coming down and then bringing the gold. Ito yung nagpayaman talaga sa mga Ibaloy. No? And then this also has historical basis. I'm going to use this painting from another national artist, Fernando Morsolo. No? His painting, Igorot from the Hills. And of course, no, if we look closely at this painting, clearly mga Ibaloy mga to because of what they're wearing. Yan. Because it is known, no, that it was the Ibaloys who mainly mined for gold in the Cordilleras and then brought them down to the lowlands where they traded this for salt, cloth, and animals. No? So, this is what facilitated the lowland-highland relationship. But at the same time, no, even the very history of the Ibaloys, the beginning of the Ibaloys, was shaped by gold. No? Linguists and anthropologists are in agreement that the beginning of the Ibaloys was in Pangasinan. No? So, pre-colonial people from Pangasinan followed the gold up the mountains at sila yung naging unang Ibaloy. So yung mga we will notice, that's why we will notice that the Ibaloy language has so many similarities with Pangasinan. That's because they share a common ancestry. They share a common linguistic origin. No? So it is also wrong to say, no, that lowlanders and highlanders are that divided, no? When in fact there are cases where we actually share a common history and that we have more things in common than we thought. No? So mga Ibaloy, mga pre-colonial Pangasinan nung yan, na umakyat sa Baguio kasi isinundan nila yung ginto. They followed the gold and then they mined for it. Kasi diba, the gold would wash away in the rivers, tributaries. So there you go, no? So basically, it was gold that allowed people to settle here in Benguet. Yun yung dahilan kung bakit may tao dito sa Baguio. Because a group of people followed the gold. So we can say we can trace our origins in gold, no? So, makes sense that it figures very largely in, in Ibaloy cultural memory. Yeah. Baba. So, there you go. So, literal, no? Yun yung nagpayaman sa mga Ibaloy. That is what made the Ibaloy rich, no? The gold. And then, let's go to the second verse. No? Bumaba si Bugan. She brought with her kintuman that made them rich. Yeah. So, sino si Bugan? Another very common Cordillera god, no? So, Bugan is Kabigat's sister, and she's known to be the kabunyan of palay, or anything related to grains, or anything related to planting, rice, no? And this is shared by it's not just an Ibaloy thing, no? This is also shared by the Kankanangay, no? The kintuman, no? We know this to be the red rice of Benguet. This is this is the palay that is planted during the dry season. And soon it was supplemented by the talon, no? Yung white rice, no? Ito ang ginagamit sa paggawa ng tapoy dahil madali daw itong matunaw. Yan. And then used in rituals. No? Yan. So what does this say, no? That the wealth of the Ibaloy can be found in its gold, in its search for balitok, but the wealth of the Ibaloy can also be found in its rice, no? Like, if you can satisfy your hunger, you are considered wealthy, no? If we look for its mythical basis, Nabaloy tales, folk tales among the Ibaloy, what is it that made the orphan rich? What is it that made the widow rich? Or what is it that made the two blind women rich? No, it's always rice. Laging bigas, it's always the grains, no, that they get from a strange old woman, babugan. No? So yun, no? It's telling us that wealth also finds itself in, in your ability to sustain yourself. Ayun. So that's bugan and her grains. Okay. Let's look at the third stanza naman. Okay, this is about lumawig, no? Coming down, ingko sa to'y nuwang to. We brought down the nuwang. Ano bang nuwang? Kalabaw. Si Katoy Baknang siya. This is what made them rich. Now, lumawig is very familiar to the people of Mountain Province also. No? It is the Bontocs who consider lumawig na one of their most celebrated god. No? And then, we find lumawig in this Ibaloy addim. No? And lumawig, no, is known as the god of the hunt. Some call him a warrior god. Pero he is very much known in Bontoc myth as someone who increases the pigs, the deer during the hunt, and even yung mga alaga mong manok, no. So siya yung paparami ng hayop, si lumawig, no. That is his reputation, no. And I have a hunch, no, that lumawig was borrowed by the Ibaloys because there came a need for the Ibaloy for a god na nagpaparami ng mga hayop, no. So I think we can see this, no, in like, let's say, no, Kafagway, no, which is present-day Burnham Park, no. This entire expanse that we are sitting on now used to be a apunan. It used to be a grazing grounds for cattle, for the Ibaloy Baknang. And yung mga Ibaloy, they resorted to taking care of cattle, yung pagpapastol, putting up ranches, when they saw that the gold was attracting the Spaniards too much. So bakit na mga Espanyol, they were trying to look for the famed Igorot mines. And then the Ibaloy, as a sort of strategy, ang dami lang mga naging diversion or parang other tactics, to distract the Spaniards from looking for their mines, and I think Sinay Hamada, our Baguio writer, yung founder ng Baguio Midland, or Sinay Hamada, who wrote a collection of short stories about Baguio. Here, he documented this instance. Pero syempre fiction siya, but while it's fiction, it does tell you a little bit about the interactions between Ibaloy and Spaniards, in his short story, The Punishment of Kutnon, where this character named Kutnon, in order to avoid punishment from the Spanish alcalde, pinakita niya yung nugget of gold. He brandished it to the Spaniard, and the Spaniard parang, okay, tell me where this gold is and I will feed you. And then he fed Kutnon, and then after Kutnon was fed, the Spaniard asked him, okay, so where are your gold mines now? Ayaw sabihin ni Kutnon. Kutnon refused to tell him where the mines are. And then the ending of the story was, so even if you punish me, your punishment is much better and more bearable than the punishment I will get from my ancestors if I reveal the location of our gold mines. And then, yun Kutnon was punished for not revealing the location of the gold mines. So yun, no? So nasan na ako? Masyado nang nag-meander. Pero yun, no? One of the tactics that the Ibaloy used to distract the Spaniards was they shifted their livelihood. So they lessened their gold mining, they lessened their time in the mines, and then they bought more cattle. Ito yung naging ito na yung naging livelihood nila. And we can say, no, that the number of cattle that one owned is equivalent to, yun yung naging measurement of wealth among the Ibaloy. And it further defined the relationship between Baknang and Abitag. Baknang being the rich Ibaloy class, the wealthy, and then the Abitag being the ones who served the Baknang. No? Kumbaga, there's this relationship between the Baknang and Abitag, where the Abitag serve the Baknang, but the Baknang is obligated to feed the Abitag through many prestige feasts, etc. No? So yan, no? Kapagway, now Burnham Park, used to be this pastulan, grazing grounds for cattle. No? And when the Americans came to create their hill station here and create this artificial lake, no? Pinaalis nila yung mga kalabaw. No? This forced the Ibaloy to look for land elsewhere. No? And of course, we know na the drama of American titles and Ibaloy land in Baguio City. So yan. So yung cattle, no, yung the cattle ranching, the cattle raising that the Ibaloys adopted later on, as a response to colonial power, established that as their livelihood, and there came a need for a ritual, for a god na nagpaparami ng mga hayop. No? So I see no reason, no, parang why Lumawig was shared, no? He was borrowed from their northern neighbors. Ayan. And then our last stanza, yan. Himusad si Bangan, ingkusad to'y pulusto, si kato'y bakman siya. So, out came Bangan, dala niya ang gabi niya. She brought her taro. That is what made them rich. So yung polos or yung taro, no? Wait, si Bangan pala. Ayan, so Bangan is the kabunyan that is usually associated with gardens, no? Yung mga taniman. Her name comes from Baang or Baung, meaning garden. Ayan. So, what is significant about what Bangan brought? Ingkusad to'y pulusto. She brought her taro. She brought her gabi. Okay. Pulos is that part of the gabi, the taro plant that you replant, and it is also used in funeral rituals as an offering to the dead. Or di ba there is a practice among the Ibaloy to exhume their dead when the need arises, no? When there is sickness in the family, or if there is a sort of catastrophe within the family, they are compelled to look at their mga yumao, their dead loved ones, and then see if they are demanding something in return. So they have a practice of exhuming their dead or offering their dead ancestors polos or pig or clothing or anything that they demand. No? And this is expressed through dreams or through, up to the family Ayan. So, itong pulos, ayan, used siya in funeral ceremonies. And then, inaatang ito, it is being offered so that the dead relative will have something to plant in the next world. It's a sort of accounting also for the wealth of the dead, because it is impossible for the living to be wealthy if their dead ancestors are not also wealthy. It is impossible for the living to be content if your ancestor is not content. So there is that sort of exchange between the living and the dead in the Ibaloy worldview, where you cannot achieve wealth unless you are also in communication with your ancestors, parang ganon. Because all the blessings that you get in life come from your ancestors, sort of a generational wealth. And they also have the power to take that away or to bring sickness unto the family. And so, it's a conversation with the dead. No? You bring them offerings. No? And usually, isa yan yung polos. Or minsan pa nga, just the leaves of the gabi will do. Yan. So, anong sinasabi nito about this addim? The wealth of the Ibaloy, obviously, not only do we see this addim as being representative of, yun nga, yung material culture ng mga Ibaloy. We can use this to talk about their occupational wealth. We can use this to talk about their economic conditions, or the historical conditions that made them work with balitok, that made them plant kintuman, that made them take care of nuang, and that, taro being an important ritual item. So maganda siyang gamitin para kilalanin ang mga Ibaloy. And pwede rin siyang pedagogical tool. Pero most importantly, and I think I'm about to end na, napaka-brief ng lecture ko, I think most importantly, it tells us about the Ibaloy perspective on wealth. Ano ba ang kayamanan? This addim, very much like Ibaloy mythology, teaches us that wealth is not just material. Na it can be gold, it can be kintuman, but it is also spiritual. It is also a conversation with your heritage. It is also accounting for those that are unseen, those who are not necessarily living, but also our world is analogous to their world. So parang ganon. It's an animism that is, harmony and accounting for different perspectives on what wealth means and what spiritual well-being means. And the Ibaloys have a word for this, and they call it ditong, and that is the goal, for the living and the dead to have harmony, to achieve what we call ditong or spiritual well-being. So yun. Actually, my lecture ends there. So it's really just very much focused on this addim. Sayang, I lost my original slides, but anyway, I think that this will suffice. And if we are to have a discussion, it would be about what do we do with our folk literature? What can we learn from our folk literature, and in what ways can we draw from them now? So yun lang naman. Thank you very much.
Okay, so So if there are questions or you would like to, clarifications and discussions with our guests, then we will now open the discussion. So, any questions? Any clarifications? I guess you have to stay here. Ayan.
How many left? What transcript from the oral to written can access the folk literature since the Spanish time to American occupation period time? What kind of
Thank you, Sir Stephen, for the question. I get the gist of where we're going with this question. We do have, when it comes to folklore, folk literature, or anything that has anything to do with our ancestors' pre-colonial condition, no? There is an inherent problem in that study because many of the things that we can access about our ancestors, the things that they said, the things they did, the poetry that they chanted, were recorded by its earliest versions, were recorded by Westerners. If it's not European travelers, it's American anthropologists. So the earliest variants, the earliest specimens siguro of our oral poetry were recorded by Westerners. Ito namang addim, this specific addim that is presented here it was recorded in Kabayan early this century lang, noong 2000s pa lang. But it was not in the context of the Badyog ritual in which this oral poetry was intended. It was the result of a generational memory. So yung apo, nung nag-recite nito, naalala pa niya ito. She can still remember these words from her grandfather because she herself is a chanter. So we have two sources from which we can draw our oral poetry, whether we are Ibaloy or Kankanay, or when we are an indigenous person here in the Cordilleras, we have Western sources, and they are the earlier sources. And then there is the conversation that we have with our lolo and our lola and our elders, if they can still remember these oral traditions. So when it comes to access or how much access do we have of these, all of our bodies of folklore here in Benguet, I think because of, di ba ma'am, merong thing with copyright na nawawala yung naging public domain na siya. So, because these things were published in 1910, 1920s, these sources tend to become public domain. And they no longer belong to the copyright owner. Is that accurate na? Okay. So, basically, madami actually sa internet. Everything is actually online. The Nabaloy tales, Nabaloy songs, and the Nabaloy law and ritual recorded by Claude Moss and even sources from Otto Shearer are available online for our appreciation. So I guess by doing this talk, maybe it's an invitation for us to actively seek out these sources. We cannot use the excuse na wala na, we cannot find these sources anymore. We can no longer access them because they're lost forever. But no, they're not lost forever. I mean, they're still out there. So what can we do? I think the most exciting thing about accessing our ancestors' folklore is what we can do with them now that they are presented here to us. Do we chant them anew? Do we reinterpret them? Do we refashion them into our own stories? This is a very rich resource, no, in terms of how we deal with mental health. This is a rich resource on how we imagine our fictions, creative writing. This is a rich resource in how we want Baguio to be in the future. And all those other things, diba? Because we are so well versed in Western mythology, and we are experts in the Greeks and the Romans and everything, no? But we live in Baguio, and yet we do not know the gods who helped shape our cultural landscape, basically, no? So yun lang naman, no? We have sources that are available here. Yun lang. I hope I answered your question. Sorry, I tend to be angry.
Okay, so any more? Or any message that you would like to, add or subtract? Sa mga, I guess we have may teacher naman tayo dito, no, na nagtuturo. We have teachers. Ang question ko lang is this integrated sa subjects in the elementary or high school subjects? Kasi it would be, I guess it would be good that this will also be taught in schools. So hindi lang, let's say, sa college, no, sa mga university sana, but then I believe may iPad naman sa elementary also and high school. Pero through yung folklore nga, is it being taught yung ganito? Si Ma'am siguro, you can
Answer?
yes.
Yes, I'm representing the junior high school, and I used to teach in the senior. Yes, absolutely. These are part of the contextualized education, and also integration is one part of the curriculum. So we are actually, or it's one of the indicators where we have to integrate indigenous knowledge and ideas. Yes, so it's in my class actually. I'm using all localized materials and bringing out the learnings that I have getting.
So, sa akin, it's very important kasi it's very important to teach this as early as sa elementary, and then para hindi talaga makalimutan, then it has to be taught throughout, no? Siguro meron lang yung part na, let's say, i-introduce natin yung mga cultural, yung mga artifacts or yung mga materials, no? And then eventually move on sana, no? Para they will understand better yung culture talaga dito sa Cordillera. And of course, marami namang different cultures dito sa CAR. So, I believe na it's high time for us to understand and let the young generation know about these things. Di po ba, ma'am?
Thank you. Magandang very impassioned call to. Pero yun nga, this is my third time talking about this addim. The first time was to an audience of junior and senior high teachers in a high school in Itogon. And the second time was during this lecture in Diliman that is intended for grade 7 teachers. Because I became aware, I was a high school teacher before, so I am aware of the curriculum guide and what it asks us to do. So we have the grade 7 curriculum, particularly in Filipino, that asks us to teach folk poetry and song from Luzon, Visayas, and Mindanao. Now, many teachers are not very equipped to teach. They do not have the resources to talk about these. So that's why these sorts of these cultural exchanges, resource exchanges take place. Pero yun, it is really in the curriculum specified there that you have to teach the folk poetry and the song that comes from a particular region. Better if it comes from your region, and you teach that to your students. So it's actually great that we have something like that specified in our curriculum already. because other countries do not have that. They do not privilege indigenous language. No, tayo lang ang may ganon. So it's really just about having more conversations and sharing resources with our educators. And one thing I also learned is that not all folk poetry are suitable in the classroom. Because some of these are still being chanted actively in rituals, and you're not really allowed to teach them or makialam sa mga I'm sure that your communities have their own rules when it comes to that, pero the reason why I chose the addim is because yun nga, wala na siya. It's no longer being recited. It's just stuck in a page, in a book, and it is such a waste, because it can have educational value, and it's a rich resource for imagination. Ayun lang naman, parang nakukulangan kasi tayo sa, imagination na talagang sa atin. And of course, my bias here is that because I'm coming from creative writing, it is such a shame that our creative writing is made pallid by aping after Western themes and Western motifs, when in fact our most innovative and our most interesting works in literature today in Filipino writing comes from writers who really tapped into the mythology of their community and then wrote about them and then created their own fictional worlds out of this, this myth making. So, it's really an invitation to imagine. Mag-imagine tayo sa dito sa Baguio, dami nating mga we have a lot of gods who are begging us to pay attention to them and write about them. Ala Sandman, ganun.
Okay, so yes, ma'am.
I would just want to appreciate Mom that that we have a fellow Kailian who is so passionate about researching our own culture, because I am also from Bauco, and I am so happy that I was so excited that to see her on Facebook that she's gonna speak about culture, and she's from an Ibaloy tribe and I'm from a Kankanai tribe. We are in the same municipality, but she's from the upper Bauco and I'm from the lower Bauco. And as coming from the younger generation, we don't really appreciate much of our culture. We're more of like coming from a medical student background, we're more like wanting to go abroad and living in the Philippines. And especially with my nephews, we're teaching them to speak in English as young as 3 years old and not really our own mother tongue. And here comes Mom Piluden, who is so passionate about researching addim to teach as much as young as from the elementary school to preserve and appreciate our culture. And when I was 17, I met this researcher from Monash University, and he was documenting about our culture in the mountain province, and that awakened me that how come this foreigner came all the way from Malaysia to preserve or to write down our culture, especially about Inasin, especially about our food, especially about our festivities like the Langay Festival and the Bagnats and others. And thank you, Manang, because you're a good example for us to show that we are so much wealthy in our own way. And I believe that is a challenge for us, younger generation.
Thank you, Mana, or Ading. Shadi, my mother is Ibaloy, my father is Kankanai. So, I have claims to both of those heritage, no? So yun. Asan ako? Yeah. I don't know if we met the same Malaysian researcher from Monash University, if that is the same person I'm thinking about. Pero anyway, nasaan na ba ako? Yeah. It's you mentioned that you are from the medical field. Ayun. A lot can be learned from just overall, no, Ibaloy ritual and Ibaloy mythology. No? Kung papansinin natin yung mga kwento nila, how they solved the resolutions, what do you call this? You know, the ending of their story. You know, how they solve their stories or how they provide a solution to the problem is that it always involves participation from the community through a ritual. That is how an Ibaloy story usually ends. If there's a problem in the family or there's a problem with a person, the only solution to that is through ritual. And rituals always have something to do with participation from the entire community. So parang that also teaches us, no, that because Ibaloys have rituals for mental health problems. And, how do we solve mental health problems? Involve the community. Ito yung pwedeng solution nun. Maybe we have a response to mental health if we look at Ibaloy ritual and mythology, no? So ayun, another is ayun nga, again, I'm just going to reiterate my call for this is really just an invitation to imagine, basically. Ayun, a conversation with elders, ano ba? And sorry, it's just that when we talk about culture, we always rely on old people to talk about it for us. So it's pretty unusual for a young person to talk about culture or to talk about ritual, no? So it's always, I remember a student of mine in Sagada telling me, "Ma'am, why is our culture always so elder-centric?" Sabi niya ganun. No, so of course I'm not being ageist, no, and I'm not saying there's anything wrong with the wisdom that we get from our elders. But definitely in that conversation, in order for a conversation to happen, no, syempre we have to involve ourselves, no, and young people should be invited to also reimagine different aspects of our culture, no? Na pwede natin siyang galawin, na pwede rin natin siyang paglaruan, and then try to experiment what works and what does not work, what is acceptable to a community and what is hindi pala pwede, no? So it's that sort of, just experimenting with cultural expressions that is actually exciting. And it should excite us because we do have a rich resource. So, yun lang naman. Thank you.
Okay.
I have one more. The Westerner said, actually the testimony or the record of the old oral tradition, the literature or some the addim or something the literature things to the Kankanai or Ibaloy. So they believe that our culture is oral culture. So we don't have the written culture. But already you mentioned about the early time of the Spanish time in this area, they are trading with the lowland. The gold trade, small scale of the gold trading already have been. Then meaning is their ancestors, they are streaming to the down to up, up to down. It's a cultural interchange with the upland and lowland. That meaning is there's a rich the culture, and then the commercial exchange of the things to moving around. Not only the commercial things, I guess also very cultural thing, especially the intellectual things. I just was wondering why all the times talking about the Filipino hero of the Jose Rizal. Jose Rizal time, he was studied in the Spain, the mother, like colonial, the center of the when they would study in the university in the Spain. I was wondering the period time of the almost same time of the people's living was here, and then they already have money. I mean the gold. And then also they want to have something educational purpose to some sending to some lowland. But that time was I don't know how many have the university, how many have the high education to study there. So maybe by the imagination, some of the rich family, for example, Carinio clans, some of the family members, maybe they send the lowland, some the university, some whatever, and then they can learning the Spanish. To can some some intellectual the study or research regarding their own culture. I don't know that kind of the documentation. Who will be the find it still left or not anymore cannot find. We don't need to limit all the times dependent on the Western, maybe Spanish period time. How do you think?
Thank you, sir. How to unpack the very fraught question of sir, no? I'm sure the Carino family has their own chronicles of their own lives, or people's history of Benguet, published by I think that was Pawi, is also a cultural history of Benguet, but that is more of the Baknang side of the story. Pero when it comes to Ibaloy access to intellectual sources during the time of Rizal, nasaan ba ang mga Ibaloy? Where are the Ibaloy? No? They are fending off Spanish arms that are intending to coming to the Cordilleras and get their gold. No? The Ibaloy style of mining is very small scale, which explains why many of their tools were rudimentary and basic. No? They did not advance their technology in gold mining because it was just meant to be small scale. But when the Spaniards came, definitely, their assessment of the Ibaloys was, oh, these are lazy people because they do not want to work too much for gold. No? That was their assessment. So they interpreted the Ibaloy attitude towards gold as laziness. Pero syempre, that's not the case. No? Really, the way Ibaloy see gold mining is that it is supposed to be a small-scale mining. No? So when the Spaniards came looking for their mines, they saw that as a threat, and basically it caused more isolation. They isolated themselves even more because they tried to resist colonial forces from getting their gold, no, from getting their resources, no. So, yun nga, for many years, this happened, no, more isolation, and it's even suggested that even the Ifugaos, no, the reason why they had to move further into the interior of their, yun, Ifugao and then eke out a living, no, by carving terraces into the mountains, no, was also a result of that Spanish colonial presence, no. Kaya mas lumuob sila sa mga bundok when before they were actually closer to the Ilocanos geographically. They were closer to the coastal areas, but because of a Spanish presence, it actually caused more isolation. So that was the price that they paid for resistance. They did not get the same level of education as Jose Rizal or other ilustrados. So yun, no? And that is effectively what made the Ibaloys an ethnic minority. That is a problematic term. But nowadays, no, indigenous people, because of that historical condition, no, parang hindi parehas ang naging daloy sa kasaysayan kasi nga they chose to respond to this colonial power by isolating themselves even more. No? Pero that doesn't take away the fact that there have been Ibaloy and Spanish interactions. What really changed the landscape was yung American presence and the establishment of big mining corporations in Benguet. So it was actually the Americans who successfully were able to get the gold of the Ibaloy, and that's another story. Pero yun, I don't know if I touched on the tangent that you were making, sir, or anything, but definitely it is also good to highlight, no, that the highland-lowland divide is not as drastic as we were taught it was, no. The only reason why there's a highland and lowland sort of divide was because that is a colonial narrative. Pero in the beginning, it was not as extreme as we would describe it to be, the difference between lowlander and highlander. Kasi ang nagsabi lang naman na may lowlander at highlander, mga Amerikano mga Espanyol sila lang naman nagsabi na, oh, the Igorots hate the Ilocanos hate the Igorots. Sila lang naman nagsabi nun, divide and conquer nga, di ba? So, pero actually, we had more partnerships, and we've had more, yun nga, as Sir mentioned, we were partners in trade for many, many years, and possibly not even just the material things, no, but even our stories, our intellectual sources, no? Yung kabunyan na sinasabi nating pagmamayari ng mga Igorot, the Ilocanos also have their kabunyan, no? The Ibaloy cloth that our ancestors wore was actually woven by Ilocano looms, no? So it's there is no highlander lowlander nung panahon ng ating mga ninuno. Parang tayo lang ngayon ang nagsasabi na may ganon. But that is because it's a result of what was dictated to us by our colonial masters, no? So ayun, yeah. Thank you.
Of course, when we present yung kasi yung mga folklores, yung mga poetic yung mga products ng mga like yung present mo kanina. Perhaps how can we address yung differences in interpretation? Kasi of course, merong mga different interpretations So perhaps how can we address para, let's say, yung goal talaga ng, let's say, kagaya ng present mo, the goal should to understand as it was your presentation. So how can we address? Kasi there might be different interpretations also from different personalities.
Thank you, ma'am, for the question. I forgot to make another disclaimer a while ago that that meaning of the addim was my interpretation of that addim, and definitely you might even have your own interpretations of it. My position on this and my attitude when it comes to interpretation is the more interpretations, the better. the more different our interpretations are on a single text, that's actually better. And di ba, ma'am, in the classroom, that's even more productive. Because we can actually have a conversation that we can sort out together, we can have a dialogue, rather than adhering to just one interpretation and then considering that the only thing that's correct, when in fact we might all have different experiences that inform us and that inform also our interpretation. So, ayun, no, it's that's my interpretation of the addim, and you probably have something to add or supplement that way. So, yun po.
Will that not create parang problem? Kasi if I will interpret it on my own and then I will present it, so I might not be able to interpret as the same as yours, and it might create yung parang confusion. Yon. So how can we at least avoid yung mga ganun sana? Although I understand, kasi just like if you present a song, I may have my own interpretation, you have your own, which is given na yon, no? But then how can we meet? How can we at least meet so that we can avoid yung confusion?
And thank you again, ma'am. That's why it's important to really be intentional with our, and I keep saying this word, no, conversation. Talaga makipag-dialogue, no? I think the ethical dilemma kasi ngayon, now that we are on social media, we can control whoever likes our post, we can control who replies to our post, and we do not listen to the other side. So it's a one-sided thing. I live in this bubble, you live in your bubble. Pero well, in interpreting naman song and poetry naman, hopefully naman it's not that drastic when we have differences in interpretations, no? So I think naman this is why intergenerational dialogue is so important to me also. Kailangan talagang hindi ba pwedeng makipag-usap tayo sa isang mambuno or kausapin natin ng isang, we have an elder that we can talk about, and then they can vet our interpretations. And then, I think naman talaga, as long as the dialogue is there, the willingness to have that exchange is there, then what results is actually less confusion, but actually more enlightenment, because I see where you're coming from, you see where I'm coming from, so that tends to be my attitude towards that. As long as we have that that dialogue, yung mag-usap-usap tayo, yung parang ganito, no, na hindi lang nasa akin ang monopoly of knowledge, but since this has collective ownership, this is lahat naman ng mga Ibaloy, pagmamay-ari nila ito, they can have their own take on what is collectively theirs. So yun.
Okay, so any more any more questions or clarifications or addition or anything that you would like to say? Come on. Anything that you would like to tell us also or share from our audience? Parang okay, matakot. Okay lang naman. Sir, you would like to say something? Nothing? Who else? From this table, would like to say anything? Wala talaga. Okay, so anyhow, for us here as the City Public Library, we would love to have actually yung mga resources, this is a public library, and we do hope to have more of these resources, lalong-lalo na doon sa mga, let's say, yung mga culture nga. And I also noticed itong mga researches that we have here, but I do not know, baka hindi lang kasi na i-donate sa amin. So I would like to call na sana we are open for your donations, especially when your topic is about the culture of Cordillera. Kasi talagang lacking, talagang kulang. So, this is a call to those to our listeners, and we do hope na sana mag-focus din ang research on our culture. Kasi actually if they will come and ask for, let's say, do we have this? So I can only give few, no? Iilan lang yung naibibigay namin. So it's not enough. Although it's already in the internet, sabi nga, no? But then still, ang hinahanap kasi is yung mga printed sources no? Printed sources pa rin. May mga naghahanap pa rin, especially kung talagang you do a research. So talagang ang hinahanap is yung mga researches pa rin dito. So it is our hope that you will donate, no? Kasi since these are donations, yung mga thesis and dissertations dito, these are researches from the master's and doctoral degree. So sana meron din na ma-donate dito yung mga kumukuha, yung mga nakapagtapos na. And of course, meron tayong local history collection section, but then the collection is not enough. And we're still trying, no? We're trying talaga to acquire more of the resources, no? And we're still in the process of digitizing. So hindi pa tapos. So hopefully ma-digitize namin because we already have, let's say sa local history, we already have 3 na na-identify namin na sources which is rare na kasi out of print na yung mga yon. So I guess we have to take good care of yung resources na yon. And we do hope to have more, no, that we are able to acquire more resources. And even yung mga, let's say, yung mga nasulat na sa mga journals, actually yung doon kami nahihirapan yung mga articles na nasulat ng mga local authors, on the articles. We do hope na sana magkaroon ang ating local history section para naman ito ang talagang nagiging hub, no? This is the facility for research. So it's a call, no? It's a call to everybody. Help us out in the having yung collection. Okay? So also in digitizing, some of it are already shared to us, but then it's not enough. So the Reading Club Forum continues every Saturday for as long as we can invite our guest, of course. So we have to inform everybody that this is a pro bono actually. That's why we really appreciate those guests who are coming and share to us the knowledge regarding our culture, traditions, and about Baguio and the Cordillera, no? So it's a great honor to have you here, ma'am, and thank you very much. Wait, kulang yung ating
Thank you rin po, ma'am. It's my first time to come to the library since before the pandemic. So it's I think the last time I was here was when I was researching for my thesis, and the floors were still wooden.
Yes.
The floors were still wooden, and you can hear every squeak and every
Sa second floor.
sa second floor pala yun.
Still.
Pero yun, thank you.
Okay, so with that, we do hope that you tune in for the next Saturday. So we will be posting if we can invite, no? Actually, si Mr. Jack ang nag-invite ng mga guest speakers dito. And with this, we do hope na sana yung mga nakikinig and awareness, if you want to share your knowledge to the community and to us, because this is not only for us, no? This is for the community. So we do hope na sana marami pang guest speakers to willingly na pumunta dito to present, no? To present their works, and we would greatly appreciate it. So we would like to give this certificate of appreciation to Miss L.A. Piluden, but before that, anong ibig sabihin ng L.A.?
Secret po.
LA kasi ba nakalagay dito LA? Talagang LA lang? Oh, okay, sige. So, LA Filuden as a token of gratitude for being an esteemed guest by sharing her valuable knowledge and expertise during the Reading Club Forum held here at the Baguio City Public Library, given this 12th day of November 2022. And of course, yung aming actually simple token lang ito. So, pasensya na kung anong laman niya, na-surprise na lang. Actually, para-paraan din kami dito sa City Library kasi. Okay, so thank you very much. Okay, so
We can take a picture all together.
yeah, okay, so we
With
can
our
take
speaker.
pictures with our
Because the only
speaker.
will be left the memory of this picture.
Yeah. Okay, so sa aming mga viewers, we'll get back to you once na meron kaming ma-invite na speaker na willingly to, to share her knowledge. Then we will post again in our Facebook page, and we do hope that mas marami pa the attendance will increase. We will do hybrid pa rin, face-to-face and online. So with that, we would like to say thank you to those who are here. Siguro i-show muna yung sa kanila yung mga nandito and wait ko aming Okay, so thank you very much, and we do hope na sana andito pa rin kayo or support us in this advocacy. No? This is Baguio City Public Library, and thank you very much. So with that, bye-bye!
So, picture one more all together.
Yeah, we
With
picture
the
together.
speaker, center speaker, so you can surround